In every single frame of the most important surveillance video in this case, a 6-inch fence post lines up perfectly with this person's face. Not in one frame, in every frame, for the entire length of the clip. For almost 20 years, investigators have called that the worst luck in the history of missing persons cases. Some of them, off the record, don't think it was luck at all. Her name was Jennifer Kesse, 24 years old, a finance manager who'd worked her way into her own condo in Orlando, the kind with a guard gate, because she'd earned enough to finally feel safe. She'd just gotten back from a vacation in the Caribbean with her boyfriend. That night, she called her dad while she drove home. Later, she called her boyfriend just to say goodnight. 2 completely normal phone calls. They would turn out to be the last 2 anyone in her life ever had with her. What happened to Jennifer Kesse in the hours after that goodnight call is still, 2 decades later, one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in the country. Who is the person caught on camera calmly parking her car a mile from her home and walking away? Why did it take investigators almost 20 years to test DNA evidence that had been sitting in storage the entire time? And after 2 decades of silence, why did Jennifer's own father just stand up and say this case is no longer cold? The weekend before she disappeared, Jennifer was in St. Croix, in the U.S. Virgin Islands with her boyfriend, Rob Allen. It was a normal couple's getaway. Nothing about it suggested anything was wrong. They flew back, and Jennifer spent that final Sunday night at Rob's place, before driving straight to her own job the next morning, Monday, January 23rd. She left work around 6 o'clock that evening and called her father on the drive home. That call would later become one of the most picked-apart pieces of evidence in the entire case, simply because of how unremarkable it was. Around 10 o'clock that night, she spoke to Rob one more time, and they said their goodnights. Nothing in either conversation hinted that anything was wrong. Here's the detail that matters. Jennifer had a routine. Every single morning, without fail, she texted or called Rob before she left for work. It wasn't a big romantic gesture. It was just a habit. The kind of small thing you only notice the one time it stops happening. Tuesday morning, Rob didn't get his usual text. He called her, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He told himself she was probably in a meeting and let it go for the moment. By 11 a.m., her employer was alarmed enough to call her parents directly, telling them Jennifer hadn't shown up and hadn't called in. Completely out of character for her. Her parents started the 2-hour drive from Tampa to Orlando immediately. On the way, they called the manager of Jennifer's condo complex and asked him to check her unit with a spare key. He went in. Everything inside looked completely normal, but her car was gone. When her parents and brother finally arrived around 3 in the afternoon, what they found inside was almost worse than finding nothing at all. A wet towel. Clothes laid out. Every sign that Jennifer had woken up, showered, gotten dressed, and prepared for a normal workday, and then simply never finished walking out the door. No forced entry, no struggle, no broken glass, no overturned furniture, nothing a first responder could point to and say, this is where it happened. Because Jennifer was a legal adult with no evidence of foul play yet on record, police initially had to entertain the possibility that she'd left on her own. Her family didn't believe that for a second, and they were right to push back, because that single afternoon of doubt is one investigators now believe cost them their best early window to canvass the area, while evidence was still fresh. For 2 full days, Jennifer's car was missing, along with Jennifer herself. Then, Thursday morning, a tenant at an apartment complex about a mile from Jennifer's home recognized her black Chevy Malibu from news coverage. It had been sitting there, untouched, for days. He called police. It was confirmed almost immediately. Jennifer's 2004 Malibu, abandoned in a parking lot she had no known connection to. And that complex happened to have something most of Orlando didn't have in 2006. Multiple hidden surveillance cameras covering that exact lot. Investigators pulled the footage, and there it was, time-stamped almost exactly noon on January 24th, the same day Jennifer vanished, someone parking her car, stepping out, and walking away like it was the most unremarkable thing in the world. This is the detail that made this case infamous far beyond Orlando. The parking lot was surrounded by fencing, and across every single available frame of that footage, every angle, every camera, every second the person is visible, that fence lines up in exactly the wrong place, blocking the one feature that could have ended this case in 2006. The FBI got involved almost immediately to analyze posture and build. The best they could determine was a height range somewhere between 5'3" and 5'5". NASA's imaging team was even brought in to attempt enhancement on the footage, applying the same kind of optical processing used on satellite imagery. Despite federal resources and space agency-grade technology, no identity was ever extracted. No face, no match, nothing. A search dog was brought in and picked up a scent trail leading from the abandoned car back in the direction of Jennifer's own condo complex, suggesting whoever parked that car may have doubled back on foot. The trail went cold. No further physical evidence turned up along the route. When investigators processed the Malibu itself, it appeared to have been deliberately wiped down. Still, a latent fingerprint and a small DNA sample were recovered. And here's a detail that ruled out one obvious motive almost instantly. Nothing valuable was taken from the car. No theft. But several of Jennifer's personal items were missing entirely. Her cell phone, her iPod, her keys, her purse, her briefcase, and the exact outfit she'd put on that morning. Her phone was never powered on again. Her bank card was never used again. Whoever did this didn't want money. They wanted Jennifer. And they wanted anything that could be traced back to her. Like in any disappearance, investigators started close to home. Family, friends, anyone with a motive, an ex-boyfriend, reportedly still hoping to reconcile with Jennifer, was brought in and questioned, and ultimately cleared. Rob, her current boyfriend, was questioned too, and was also eliminated as a suspect early on. At her workplace, a forensic review of her computer turned up something uncomfortable. A manager who had wanted more than a professional relationship with her. Jennifer had turned him down. She didn't believe in mixing her personal life with her job. He was interviewed multiple times. He was ultimately ruled out as well. There's one more thread investigators couldn't fully close, and it's an uncomfortable one. Jennifer's condo complex was under major construction at the time, with a large crew of laborers on site, many of whom didn't speak English. Jennifer had told family members on more than one occasion that some of the workers catcalled and harassed her. Because of the language barrier, detectives were never able to thoroughly interview many of them, and to this day, no solid lead ever came out of that group. It's not an accusation. It's an investigative gap that's never been closed, and the case file reflects that. Human trafficking has remained on the table the entire time too, considered less likely than a targeted, local crime, but never formally ruled out. In 2007, Jennifer's employer, timeshare mogul David Siegel, put up a $1 million reward for information leading to her safe return. With a hard condition, she had to be found alive. The deadline came. The deadline went. Nobody ever claimed it. In 2008, Florida's legislature unanimously passed what became known as the Jennifer Kesse and Tiffany Sessions Missing Persons Act, reforming how the state handles missing adult cases, a small, permanent mark Jennifer's disappearance left on the law itself. In 2010, the FBI formally joined the investigation. In 2018, after years of frustration over what they could and couldn't see, Jennifer's parents sued the Orlando Police Department for access to the case file. It settled in 2019. They finally got roughly 16,000 pages of records, and in December of 2022, the case was handed to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Cold Case Unit, investigators trained specifically to look at decades-old files with fresh eyes and modern forensic tools. On what would have been Jennifer's 44th birthday, the shuttle announced they had gone through thousands of pages of old documents and spoken to roughly 45 people since taking over the case. For the first time in years, they used a specific phrase: "This case is no longer cold." They also said something that should have been impossible in 2006. Artificial intelligence might finally be able to do what the FBI and NASA couldn't 2 decades ago: pull a real identification out of that fence-obstructed footage. Then, just months later, Jennifer's father, Drew Kesse, delivered the biggest update in this case's history. Investigators had found DNA within evidence that had never been tested, directly contradicting what the family had been told for years: that DNA had only ever been pulled from the steering wheel. Drew said the list of persons of interest had been significantly narrowed. Around the same time, it was announced that a documentary team is now producing a television series on Jennifer's case, expected to release in early 2026. As of right now, there are still no arrests. There is still no name attached to that figure walking away from the Malibu. The fence post is still, technically, undefeated. But for the first time in almost 20 years, the people actually running this investigation are saying, on the record, that it might not stay that way much longer. Jennifer Kesse was 24 years old. She worked her way into her own home. She was planning a future with someone she loved. She called her dad on a random Monday evening for no reason other than that's the kind of daughter she was. 20 years later, her parents are still making that same 2-hour drive from Tampa in their minds every single day, still waiting on one phone call that actually answers something. If the same DNA technology that's cracked cold cases across this country can do for Jennifer what it's done for so many other families, this might finally be the year it happens. Here's the question that's bothered investigators for almost 20 years. If that fence post lining up with this person's face really was just bad luck, why does it line up in every single frame, every single time, with no exceptions? Do you think that's coincidence? Or do you think whoever's in that footage knew exactly where every camera was pointed? Tell me what you think in the comments. The moment those DNA results come back, or an arrest is finally made, I will break it down here, in full. As soon as it happens, this is not a closed case anymore. If you want to actually see how this one ends, make sure you're subscribed with the bell turned on.